For many years my garden revolved around the compost heap. It was the heart of my allotment, a dark, steaming altar where I offered up kitchen scraps and garden waste. I believed, as many gardeners do, that finished compost was the ultimate prize. I would spend hours turning the heap, checking its temperature, and worrying about its moisture levels. When it was finally ready, a rich, dark, crumbly material, I would barrow it across my plots. I spread it with great care, believing I was giving my soil the very best. Yet, my results were often inconsistent. Some beds would flourish, while others would struggle with the same application. I noticed my soil would dry out surprisingly quickly, even after a generous mulch of my precious compost. The problem became more apparent in my vegetable beds. One row of carrots might grow strong and straight, while the next, seemingly identical, would produce stunted and forked roots. My brassicas in one patch were plagued by pests, yet a few feet away, they were thriving. I was doing everything by the book. I was feeding the soil with what I thought was pure gold, but the soil was not responding uniformly. I started to question my methods. Was this compost, this material I had worked so hard to create, truly the best way to build healthy, resilient soil? The effort was immense, and the rewards felt like a lottery. I was a slave to the compost heap, and it wasn't always paying me back for my labor. This frustration led me to observe my garden more closely, to look beyond the established rules. I saw how nature managed things without a single compost bin in sight. In the nearby woodland, leaves and fallen branches lay where they fell. They slowly broke down, creating a wonderful spongy layer of humus right on the surface. No one was there to turn them or manage their carbon to nitrogen ratio. The soil beneath was alive, dark, and full of worms. This simple observation sparked a powerful idea. What if I stopped all the heavy lifting? What if I let the soil food web do the work for me, right where the plants were growing? It was a radical thought that went against everything I had been taught. My first experiment was small and born of weariness as much as curiosity. At the end of one season, instead of clearing away the spent bean plants and adding them to the compost heap, I simply chopped them up. I left the pieces lying on the surface of the bed. I did the same with some fading calendula flowers and a few handfuls of grass clippings. It felt wrong, almost lazy. The bed looked untidy, a stark contrast to the neat, bare soil I usually aimed for over winter. But I resisted the urge to tidy it up. I left the roots in the ground and the chopped-up leaves on top. I was stepping away from my compost-centric world, and I was about to discover a far easier and more effective way to garden. The allure of traditional compost is strong. We are taught that it is a balanced, stable material, a perfect soil amendment. However, the reality can be quite different. One of the main weaknesses is the sheer inconsistency of the final product. A heap made in spring with lush green waste will have a completely different nutrient profile to one made in autumn with dry leaves and woody stems. Even within a single batch, the quality can vary enormously. The edges might be dry and undecomposed, while the center is beautifully broken down. This means when you spread it on your garden, you are not applying a uniform product. This patchiness was the reason for my inconsistent crop growth. One area received a nutrient-rich pocket, while another got a carbon-heavy, nitrogen-poor section. Another significant issue is how quickly well-made compost can disappear. Because it is already fully decomposed, the soil life consumes it very rapidly. You spread a lovely thick layer in spring and by midsummer, it can seem to have vanished. The beneficial microorganisms break it down and release its nutrients, which is good, but the physical structure it provides is short-lived. This means you are constantly on a treadmill, needing to produce and apply more and more compost just to maintain the status quo. It is a labor-intensive cycle of filling, turning, emptying, and spreading. For a home gardener, producing enough high-quality compost to mulch an entire garden every year is a monumental task. Furthermore, compost heaps can be inefficient. The process of hot composting, which is the fastest way to get finished compost, actually burns off a lot of valuable carbon and nitrogen. The heat is generated by microorganisms breaking down organic matter, and in the process, carbon is released as carbon dioxide, and nitrogen can be lost as ammonia gas. You are losing nutrients and organic matter to the atmosphere before they even get to your soil. A large, well-managed heap can lose up to half of its original volume and mass during decomposition. You start with a huge pile of garden waste and end up with a much smaller amount of compost. It is a process that involves a lot of shrinkage and loss. Finally, the whole process separates the decomposition from where it is most needed, the soil itself. You are essentially creating a soil food web in a box 100 feet away from your actual garden beds. Then you move the finished product, which has lost some of its life and vitality in the transfer. All the intricate connections between the decaying matter and the living roots, fungi, and bacteria in the soil are broken. You are giving the soil a pre-digested meal instead of allowing it to feast on the raw ingredients. This separation is at the core of why traditional composting, for all its benefits, is not the most efficient or natural way to build soil health directly where your plants grow. My journey towards in-place decomposition, or what I call the chop and drop method, was a gradual revelation. It began with that simple, untidy bed of chopped bean plants. As winter turned to spring, I watched that bed with great interest. I noticed something remarkable happening. The chopped-up leaves and stems were slowly disappearing, melting into the soil surface. When I gently scraped back the mulch, I found the soil was teeming with life. There were worms everywhere, pulling the organic matter down into their burrows. The soil was dark, moist, and had a beautiful crumbly texture. It was a stark contrast to the neighboring beds, which I had left bare and were now capped with a hard, dry crust. This discovery was a light bulb moment. I realized I had been working far too hard. Instead of concentrating all the decomposition in one corner of the garden, I could decentralize it. I could let it happen right on the surface of every single bed. The principle is simple. You are feeding the soil life directly. By leaving organic materials on the surface, you create a perfect habitat for worms, beetles, centipedes, and a universe of microorganisms. These creatures are the true soil builders. They take the raw materials, the leaves, stems, and clippings, and process them into stable humus, creating tunnels, improving aeration, and leaving behind nutrient-rich castings exactly where plant roots can access them. I started applying this method across my whole garden. After harvesting a crop, I would chop the old plants down, leaving the roots in the ground to decay and create channels in the soil. I would then add other organic matter from around the garden directly on top. Weeds that had not set seed, prunings from shrubs, spent flowers, everything became a direct surface mulch. It felt like I was simply putting things back where they came from. This process mimics the natural cycles of a forest floor or a meadow, where organic matter constantly accumulates on the surface and is slowly incorporated into the soil. It is a gentle, continuous feeding process, not a feast and famine cycle. The key difference is the speed of decomposition. Unlike a hot compost heap that breaks everything down quickly, this surface mulch decomposes slowly. This slow release is hugely beneficial. It provides a steady supply of nutrients to the plants over a much longer period. It also means the physical mulch layer lasts longer, protecting the soil from sun and wind, suppressing weeds, and conserving moisture. I was no longer just feeding my plants for a few weeks. I was building a resilient, self-sustaining soil ecosystem that would support healthy growth for the entire season and beyond. It was a shift from feeding the plants to feeding the soil that feeds the plants. Applying the chop and drop method is beautifully simple and can be adapted for any gardening situation. The main principle is to create a balanced mulch directly on the soil surface. You are aiming for a mix of green materials, which are rich in nitrogen, and brown materials, which are rich in carbon. A good ratio to start with is roughly 1 part green to 2 or 3 parts brown by volume. Now, this isn't a strict recipe, it's more of a guideline to make sure the mulch breaks down efficiently without becoming slimy or using up soil nitrogen. Greens include things like grass clippings, young weeds, comfrey leaves, and vegetable trimmings. Browns include materials like straw, shredded cardboard, dry leaves, or woody prunings chopped into small pieces. In a traditional garden bed or on an allotment, the process is pretty straightforward. When you finish harvesting a crop like lettuce or beans, just chop the plants at the base and leave the roots in the soil. Then, chop the leafy tops into smaller pieces and let them fall right onto the bed. This becomes your first layer of green material. You can then add more greens, such as a layer of comfrey, leaves, or fresh grass clippings, and follow this with a thicker layer of brown material, like a good mulch of straw or shredded autumn leaves you have saved. This brown layer helps to lock in moisture and prevents the green layer from breaking down too quickly or becoming smelly. Basically, you are building layers just like in a compost heap but directly on the bed. For raised beds, the method is identical, but often even easier to manage because of the contained space. The edges of the bed help to hold the mulch in place, and it's particularly effective here since raised beds can dry out very quickly. A constant surface mulch of chopped organic matter dramatically reduces the need for watering. After harvesting, chop and drop the old plants. Add kitchen waste, just avoid cooked food, meat, and dairy. Then top it all off with a layer of shredded paper, cardboard, or old potting soil from last year's containers. The worms in the raised bed will be thrilled with this constant supply of food and will work tirelessly to improve the soil structure for you. Even in containers and pots, this principle works wonders. Potted plants quickly exhaust the nutrients in their compost, so instead of just using liquid feeds, you can create a mini chop and drop system. Lay small amounts of chopped green material, like spent flower heads or soft herb cuttings on the surface. Then add a very fine brown mulch such as shredded leaves or coir fiber. As you water, the nutrients from the decomposing mulch will be washed down to the roots. This creates a much healthier and more resilient soil environment within the pot. The key in all situations is to keep the soil surface covered with a mix of organic materials, letting nature's decomposers do the hard work for you. The transformation in my garden since I ditched the compost heap has been nothing short of astonishing. The most immediate and obvious benefit was the improvement in soil moisture. The permanent mulch layer acts like a sponge, soaking up rain and preventing it from running off. It also acts as a physical barrier, dramatically reducing evaporation caused by the sun and wind. I found myself watering far less, even during the dry spells of summer. My raised beds, which previously needed watering almost daily, could now go for several days without any intervention. This saved me an incredible amount of time, and more importantly, conserved a precious resource. The soil beneath the mulch remained consistently damp and cool to the touch. This constant moisture and food supply created the perfect environment for soil life, leading to a dramatic improvement in soil structure. My soil, which in some areas was a heavy clay, became wonderfully dark, crumbly, and friable. It is now teeming with earthworms. You can't put a fork in the ground without seeing them. Their burrows create channels for air and water, and their castings are one of the best natural fertilizers available. This living, breathing soil is a joy to work with. Planting is now effortless. I can often make a hole for a new seedling with just my hands. The soil no longer compacts or forms a hard crust after rain. It is alive and resilient. A wonderful side effect of this method has been a massive reduction in weeds. The thick layer of surface mulch blocks sunlight from reaching the soil, preventing most weed seeds from germinating. The few that do manage to push through the mulch have very shallow roots and are incredibly easy to pull out from the loose, friable surface. I spend a fraction of the time weeding that I used to. This has freed me up to focus on the more enjoyable aspects of gardening, like planting and harvesting. My garden looks tidier in a different way now, not bare and sterile, but covered in a productive, protective blanket. Ultimately, all these benefits have led to healthier plants and bigger crops. My vegetables are more robust and seem far more resistant to pests and diseases. The slow, steady release of nutrients from the decomposing mulch provides them with exactly what they need, when they need it. My harvests have become more consistent and abundant. Carrots grow straight and long, cabbages form dense, healthy heads, and my tomato plants are laden with fruit. I am achieving better results with significantly less work. I no longer spend weekends turning compost or barrowing it around. My garden is thriving because I have learned to work with nature, not against it. Comparing traditional composting with the chop and drop method reveals a fundamental difference in approach. Traditional composting is an extractive process followed by an application. You take organic matter away from where it grew, process it in a separate location, and then bring a portion of it back. The science behind hot composting is about accelerating decomposition through heat, which kills pathogens and weed seeds but also burns off carbon and nitrogen. It creates a stable, homogeneous product, but one that has lost some of its potential energy and life force. It is an industrial model of efficiency, focused on producing a finished product as quickly as possible. In-place decomposition, on the other hand, is a holistic biological process. It is based on the science of the soil food web. By placing raw organic matter directly on the soil, you are providing a diverse menu for a huge range of organisms, from microscopic bacteria and fungi to larger creatures like worms and beetles. Fungi, in particular, play a crucial role. Their mycelial networks extend through the soil, breaking down tough, woody, carbon-rich materials and transporting nutrients and water directly to plant roots. This symbiotic relationship is largely absent when you just spread pre-decomposed compost. You are fostering a complex living ecosystem right where it matters most. The key scientific advantage of the chop and drop method lies in its preservation of carbon. Instead of being released as carbon dioxide from a hot compost heap, the carbon from the brown materials is slowly and steadily incorporated into the soil. This process, known as soil carbon sequestration, is vital for building long-term fertility. It creates humus, the dark, spongy component of soil that is brilliant at holding onto water and nutrients. You are not just feeding this year's crop, you are building soil capital for years to come. It is a regenerative practice that improves the soil with every application, turning your garden into a carbon sink. From a practical standpoint, the simplicity is undeniable. Traditional composting requires space for the bins, tools for turning, and significant physical effort. You need to manage the ratios, the moisture, and the aeration. Chop and drop requires only a pair of secateurs, or shears. The effort is minimal and spread out through the year rather than concentrated into a few backbreaking weekends. It closes the loop within the garden, recycling nutrients and organic matter with maximum efficiency and minimum labor. It is a method that trusts the intricate science of nature to do the job better than we ever could with a plastic bin and a garden fork. My journey away from the compost heap has led me to a garden that is more productive, more resilient, and infinitely more enjoyable. My soil is now the best it has ever been, dark, fragrant, and full of life. My harvests are bigger, and my plants are healthier, and I achieve all this with far less work. I no longer feel the pressure to constantly feed my garden with barrow loads of compost. Instead, I simply cover the ground with the organic matter that is already there, and I let the soil food web do the rest. It is the best shortcut a gardener could ever wish for because it is not a shortcut that cuts corners on quality. It is a shortcut to a better, more natural system. If you are feeling tied to your compost heap, or if you are frustrated with inconsistent results, I wholeheartedly encourage you to give this method a try. You do not have to abandon your compost bin overnight. Start small, choose one bed. After you harvest your next crop, simply chop the plants down and leave them on the surface. Add a layer of grass clippings or weeds and then cover it with some straw, shredded cardboard, or dry leaves. Then, just watch what happens. Observe how the mulch settles, how the worms appear, and how the soil underneath stays moist and soft. Let the results speak for themselves. The beauty of this method is its flexibility. There are no rigid rules, only gentle principles. Use what you have. If you have a lot of woody prunings, chop them up and use them as a carbon layer. If you have a lawn, use the grass clippings as a nitrogen-rich layer. The key is to keep the soil covered. Think of it as putting a blanket on your beds to tuck them in. This protective layer will feed the soil, conserve water, and stop weeds all at the same time. It is a simple, elegant solution that works in harmony with nature's own processes. So, put down the garden fork and step away from the compost heap for a little while. Embrace a little bit of untidiness in the pursuit of a healthier garden. Let the worms be your partners in cultivation. By feeding the soil directly, you will unlock a level of fertility and ease in your gardening that you may not have thought possible. It has transformed my garden and my approach to growing food, and I am certain it can do the same for you. Give it a go. The soil will thank you for it.